Usually I would take I-40 over to Asheville and then hop on the Blue Ridge Parkway, but for some reason I trusted Google Maps, which thought that the Blue Ridge Parkway was closed until December 30th. I found myself on 215, which follows along the Pigeon River until I came out on the BRP. From there, it was a short drive to 816, which ended at the trailhead. I had originally wanted to go to Tennant Mountain, since I had never been before. That would mean using the Avesta Gap Trail, but there were several dozen hunters and their dogs heading up and down it. The trail that went over to Sam's Knob looked a lot less populated, and because of the lateness of the day, I decided that it instead would be perfect for my quick overnighter. Here Sam's Knob stood right in front of me, and I don't really recognize it. I should, because Lissa and I visited the knob 5 years earlier, and I remember stashing our packs at the bottom of the trail and hiking up, but remember few particulars about the top. Standing at an impressive 6,072 feet, I'm glad I came back for a second view. The trail drops down to about 5,650 feet, then climbs up to that 6,000 feet over 0.6 miles. It's an easy short hike up to the top, but it was a little slippery and muddy. We encountered only a few people coming down the trail. As nice a day as it was, I would have expected more people. While it was 66 degrees driving through Asheville, here at a bit more elevation it was much cooler, right at 50 degrees according to my thermometer. I had on my Outdoor Research Ascendant hoodie when I left my car, but quickly shed it knowing I would easily build up heat along the way. I've been nursing my ankle since my Smoky Mountain trip in November and didn't want to mess it up again, so it was slow, calculated steps as I navigated the potentially slippery rocks. At this point of the trail I was starting to sweat, and you know, if you sweat, you die. That's a Les Stroud joke I use way too often. Some of the trail was a deep groove in the earth, like a channel, but the closer we got to the top, the easier the trail became, with many campsites scattered about, as well as a plethora of views. I'm going to describe the top of Sam's Knob by saying it has two peaks. There's a northern peak and a southern peak, with a very small saddle between the two. The northern peak is a little taller, but only by about 30 feet. Both offer a great view of the western sunset, and since there was a couple enjoying a late lunch on the northern peak, I ambled back a bit and went up to inspect the southern peak. I found a perfect campsite for the night and decided this is where I would stay. It was still a bit early, being only 4 p.m., so I pulled out my chair, threw on a layer and some gloves for my cold-natured hands, sat and just relaxed and enjoyed the view. It's easy to while away the time soaking in these mountains. Even though it was a short hike, it was enough to placate Bobo. She had no problem kicking back and relaxing on the top of the mountain. We only had one visitor who was, like me, looking for a campsite. We exchanged salutations and he moved on to the northern peak since it was no longer occupied, and he enjoyed his quiet mountain space as I did mine. The kids told me it was way past their 4:30 p.m. dinner time. I mean, it was almost 5 o'clock. And I appeased them with a package of Spam each, as well as their regular dinner. They didn't disagree with any of their cuisine selections. With sunset nearing, I finally picked the exact place for my tent and set it up with the back facing the light breeze that came across from the west. I had originally planned on hammocking, but I thought ahead, at least on some levels, and decided to throw in my 10-ounce with stakes Z-Packs pocket tarp in case I wanted to camp on a bald or a peak. Additionally, I threw in my Big Agnes Axle air mattress in Bobo's pack so she could assist in keeping my pack weight down. Here's where a cursory inspection of your gear as you pack at home gets rewarded with less than stellar results. That's a jet boil you see there. So why am I lighting Esbit, a solid fuel, you may ask? Well, I assumed that the fuel was inside the stove. It wasn't. Luckily, I always bring 2 Esbit cubes as an emergency backup. This enabled me to make a nice, warm, sugar-filled tea to complete my sunset experience. In Shining Rock, Black Balsam, and Sam's Knob, bear canisters are required. An Ursack, which is a bear-proof device, is often an acceptable and lighter substitute in the place of a canister. I found the thickest and tallest tree near me and tied off my Ursack. Honestly, I forgot which knot I was supposed to use and improvised. Next time, I'll refresh my memory on the correct knot immediately preceding the trip. Food safely secured, it was time to get a long night's sleep. With Bobo by my side and Clover the burrower, who always crawls to the bottom of my quilt to keep my feet warm, all tucked in, we drifted off to a nice, peaceful sleep. The wind picked up a little around midnight, and the temperatures dropped to around 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Clover, sleeping at my feet in my top quilt, would slowly and consistently slide off the air mattress and pull my quilt along with her, leaving me to wake up cold. Eventually, I remembered that I had an underquilt in my backpack that had been meant for my hammock. It would serve perfectly as a blanket. When morning came, I was warm and cozy, wrapped up almost exclusively using my underquilt, since Clover and Bobo had stolen away my top quilt. Looking south, you can see close by is Chestnut Bald, and the little bump to the right of it is Devil's Courthouse. Then turning west, you can see Green Knob on the other side of NC 215. Here I am making a little video for my friend Owen. I'm giving him an update on the performance of the Outdoor Research Ascendant hoodie. It had surprised me with how well it had worked, and I wanted to give him an update. Gear geeks do weird things. Don't judge. The sun continued to rise over Tennant Mountain. My iPhone doesn't capture these colors sufficiently, but you get an idea of how amazing it was. Who are all those dogs making all that racket over there? Huh? You don't know. You ready to go? You ready? Clover's ready. Come on, Clover, let's go. Let's go. Come on. Let's go down trail. It seems that the hunters had returned to resume what they hadn't finished yesterday. The dogs and their baying and howling echoed from mountain to mountain and all through the area. With one last look around, we headed on down the trail. These are the deep channels I spoke of earlier. I can only imagine what this would be like after or during a good rain. Probably a mini little stream running through here. I took even more care today than I did yesterday, since the ground got to freezing. Much of the ground was frozen and made the slick rocks even slicker with ice. Here's an example of needle ice, which forms when the ground is above 32 degrees, but the surface air temperature is below 32 degrees. This tree reminds me of the dragon tree close by near Skinny Dip Falls on the MST, except maybe this one is more like the rhinoceros tree? Bear scat, I presume? The rest of the hike out was extremely nice, though filled with the constant baying of the hounds and an occasional "Go get 'em, boy!" shouted by the hunters, which rang across the mountains. We climbed up and out of the gap, eventually made it to our car, and said our farewells to the Ranger District of Pisgah National Forest. My memories of this area yearn to be refreshed with another visit, so I know I'll be back soon.